I'm Paige, 38 female. I live alone in a small but sunny apartment 2 states away from the life I was supposed to have, working as a freelance graphic designer. For the first time in my adult life, my schedule is my own, my home is quiet, and my future feels like a blank canvas instead of a page someone else already filled in. It took burning my entire world down to get here, but it was worth it. This is a story about how I spent a decade as my sister's unpaid, unappreciated nanny, and how, 8 years after she called me selfish for finally leaving, she came crawling back, forcing her to finally admit that I had raised her children better than she ever could. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My sister Lauren is 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she was the sun I orbited. She was louder, more ambitious, and always seemed to have a 5-year plan while I was still figuring out the next 5 days. When she married Ian, a financial analyst with the same relentless drive, their life seemed to shift into hyperdrive. They bought a massive house in a prestigious suburb, drove luxury cars, and climbed their respective corporate ladders with an intensity that was both impressive and terrifying. I was proud of her, genuinely. But I was also the one who saw the cracks behind the perfect facade long before anyone else. When her son, Rowan, was born, I was 21, fresh out of college with a degree in design and a portfolio full of dreams. Lauren's maternity leave was comically short, 6 weeks of frantic emails and conference calls before she was back in the office. Ian's paternity leave was non-existent. That's when the calls started. "Paige, sweetie, could you possibly come over for a few hours? The nanny called out sick." Or, "We have this last-minute networking dinner, and it's a huge opportunity for Ian. You'd be a lifesaver." At first, it felt natural. I was the doting aunt happy to help. I loved Rowan. He was a sweet, curious baby, and spending time with him was a joy. I was working a low-paying internship, so my schedule was flexible. Of course, I'd say, every single time. The few hours would turn into a full day. The one evening would stretch into an entire weekend. Lauren would leave a $100 bill on the counter, not as payment, but as a dismissive gesture she called gas money. It never covered the cost of my time, the meals I cooked, or the plans I canceled, but I didn't complain. She was my sister, and this was just what family did. 4 years later, when Juliet was born, the dynamic became permanent. Lauren and Ian's careers had exploded. They were partners at their firms, earning astronomical salaries, but their time at home dwindled to almost nothing. The series of rotating nannies became a blur of faces, none of them lasting more than a few months. They complained about the long hours, the last-minute demands, and the general feeling of being staff in a house that felt more like a corporate office. After the 5th nanny quit with no notice, Lauren sat me down in her sterile, all-white kitchen. She looked exhausted, her expensive suit looking out of place amidst the baby bottles and toys I had just finished tidying. "Paige," she began, her voice strained, "this isn't working. The kids need stability. They need family." She proposed a deal that, at the time, she framed as a massive favor to me. I could move into their spacious guest suite rent-free. No more worries about my tiny apartment or scraping by. In exchange, I would be the primary caregiver for Rowan and Juliet. "You'd be their aunt, not their nanny," she'd insisted. "It's different. It's better." What she was offering wasn't a job, it was an absorption. My life would cease to exist, and I would become a functional part of her household machine. I was 25, and my freelance design career was just starting to gain traction. I had clients, a growing portfolio, and a dream of one day opening my own small studio. But I looked at my nephew, Rowan, who was now 4 and already showing signs of anxiety every time a new nanny started, and my brand new niece, Juliet, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. I saw the desperation in my sister's eyes. And foolishly, I believed that helping her was the right thing to do, so I said yes. My life became a blur of school runs, doctor's appointments, meal prep, and bedtime stories. I was the one who taught Rowan how to ride his bike and the one who held Juliet's hand on her first day of preschool. I knew their favorite foods, their secret fears, and the names of all their imaginary friends. I was their Aunt Paige, but in function, I was their mother. Lauren and Ian were ghosts in their own home. They'd leave before the kids woke up and return long after I'd tucked them into bed, often checking their phones at the dinner table on the rare nights we ate together. They provided the money, and I provided the everything else: the love, the stability, the emotional support. My design work was relegated to the late hours of the night, after the kids were asleep and the house was finally quiet. My client base dwindled. My dreams of a studio were packed away in a box, just like the rest of my personal belongings now stored in my sister's basement. My friends stopped calling, tired of me always canceling at the last minute because something came up with the kids. Lauren saw my sacrifice not as a gift but as a convenience. She never said thank you. Instead, she'd offer critiques disguised as helpful suggestions. You should really get Juliet into a more structured playgroup page. The one you found seems a bit casual. Or, I saw Rowan's report card. His math grade is slipping. We need to be more diligent with his homework. The we was always royal. She meant me. My contributions were invisible to her. I wasn't just the unpaid nanny. I was the resident manager of her children's lives, expected to perform perfectly without pay, recognition, or respect. This went on for 6 years. 6 years of my 20s sacrificed at the altar of my sister's ambition. I was no longer Paige, the graphic designer. I was just Aunt Paige, a permanent fixture in Lauren and Ian's perfect life. I was the silent, unpaid cog that kept their family running, always present, always reliable, and completely taken for granted. The resentment began as a low simmer and slowly grew into a boiling rage I could barely contain. I loved those kids more than anything, but I was disappearing, and it felt like no one, especially not my sister, even noticed. She had the perfect career, the perfect house, and the perfect family, all built on the foundation of my silent, unacknowledged labor. The breaking point didn't arrive with a dramatic explosion, but with a quiet, soul-crushing conversation. I was 30, standing in the same gleaming white kitchen that had become my gilded cage. Rowan was 10 and Juliet was 6. For years, I had been nurturing a small, secret hope, a freelance project with a major publishing house. It was a chance to design the cover for a series of young adult novels. It wasn't just a gig, it was a lifeline, a tangible link to the person I used to be. The editor loved my initial concepts and had offered me a contract. It would be demanding, requiring focused work and tight deadlines, but it was the first real career opportunity I'd had in almost a decade. It was my chance to start rebuilding. I chose my moment carefully, waiting for a rare Saturday when Lauren and Ian were both home. The kids were at a friend's birthday party, and the house was unnervingly quiet. I found Lauren in her home office, scrolling through emails on her massive monitor. I knocked softly on the doorframe. "Lauren, do you have a minute?" I asked, my heart pounding. I felt like a teenager asking for permission to go out. She didn't look up from her screen. "Busy, Paige, what is it?" I took a deep breath. I've been offered a big design project, a really big one. It's with a major publisher, and it could be a game changer for my career. I tried to keep my voice steady, professional. "It's going to require a lot of my time for the next few months, so we'll need to figure out a new system for the kids. Maybe we could look at hiring some after-school help, or you and Ian could adjust your schedules a bit." Finally, she swiveled in her leather chair to face me. Her expression wasn't one of happiness or pride. It was one of pure, unadulterated annoyance. She looked at me as if I had just announced I was going to set the kitchen on fire. "A project," she repeated, her voice dripping with condescension. "You have a project. What about your project here? Rowan has his science fair coming up, and Juliet just started ballet. They need you. This isn't a good time for you to get distracted with a little hobby." The word hobby landed like a slap in the face. All those late nights, all the work I'd poured into maintaining my skills, all my dreams, she dismissed it all as a little hobby. "It's not a hobby, Lauren," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "It's my career, the one I put on hold for 6 years to raise your children." She actually scoffed. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You've had it easy here. A free place to live, no bills to worry about. Most people would kill for that kind of setup. We've given you a safety net so you could follow your passion without any of the real-world pressure." The audacity of her statement left me breathless. She had twisted my sacrifice into a privilege she had bestowed upon me. She didn't see the years I had given her. She saw the years she had given me. "A safety net?" I fired back, the anger finally boiling over. "I'm on call 24/7. I haven't taken a vacation in 6 years. I do the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, the school runs, the homework help, the parent-teacher conferences. I am a full-time, live-in nanny, caregiver, and house manager, and you don't even have the decency to pay me a salary. You think that $100 bill you leave on the counter covers it? This isn't a safety net, Lauren. It's exploitation." Her face hardened, her lawyer mode kicking in. She stood up, crossing her arms. "We are family, Paige. We support each other. I support you by giving you a home. You support me by helping with the kids. That was the arrangement. Are you saying you want to go back on our arrangement?" "The arrangement is no longer working for me," I said, my voice shaking. "I am 30 years old. I have no savings, no career, no life of my own. I need to do this project. I need to start building something for myself." That's when she said the words that would sever our relationship for nearly a decade. She looked at me, her eyes cold and void of any sisterly affection. "I can't believe how incredibly selfish you're being," she said, her voice low and sharp. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By abandoning my children the second a more interesting offer comes along, you don't get to just check out because you're bored. They are your niece and nephew. You have a responsibility." Selfish? The word echoed in the silent room. I had sacrificed my youth, my dreams, and my identity for her family. I had poured every ounce of love and energy I had into her children. I had become a ghost in my own life so she could live hers to the fullest. And my reward was to be branded as selfish for wanting a single shred of a life for myself. Something inside me didn't just break, it turned to steel. In that moment, I saw Lauren for who she truly was, a user. She didn't love me as a sister. She valued me as an asset. I was the free, convenient, and guilt-free solution to her childcare problem. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I just stared at her, the blood roaring in my ears. "Okay," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You think I'm selfish? Fine, I'll show you selfish." I turned and walked out of her office, went up to my room, the guest suite that had been my prison, and started to pack a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay another night under that roof. I called my one remaining friend, Sarah, who lived 2 states away, and through choked sobs, asked if I could crash on her couch. When I walked downstairs with my suitcase, Lauren was waiting in the foyer, her arms still crossed. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "I'm leaving," I said simply. "You'll need to find a new nanny. I'm sure you can afford a good one." Her face went from anger to panic. "You can't just leave. The kids will be home in an hour. What am I supposed to tell them?" "Tell them their selfish aunt decided to finally have a life of her own," I said, opening the front door. "Tell them whatever you want. You usually do." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I left behind the 2 children I had raised as my own, and it was the single most painful thing I had ever done. But the sting of their absence was matched only by the crushing weight of my sister's accusation. She hadn't just insulted me, she had fundamentally misunderstood the very nature of my existence for the past decade. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would never, ever let her forget it. The 8 years that followed my departure were a slow, arduous climb back to myself. The first year was the hardest. I crashed on Sarah's couch, mourning Rowan and Juliet as if they had been lost to me forever. I cried myself to sleep most nights, clutching a faded photograph of the 3 of us at the zoo. I took the publishing gig and poured all my grief and anger into my work, designing covers that were dark, beautiful, and full of emotion. The book series became a bestseller, and my work got noticed. Slowly, painstakingly, I built a new life. I got my own apartment. I rebuilt my client list, this time on my own terms, setting firm boundaries. I made new friends who knew me as Paige, the talented designer, not just Lauren's sister or the kid's aunt. I went on dates. I traveled. I started saving money, something I'd never been able to do before. I was healing, but a part of my heart remained walled off, a space that only Rowan and Juliet had ever occupied. My communication with Lauren was non-existent. She didn't call. I didn't call. The rest of our family was caught in the middle, feeding me scraps of information. I heard through our mother that Lauren had hired a series of expensive nannies who never stayed long. I heard that Rowan was becoming withdrawn and that Juliet was acting out. Each piece of news was a small, painful twist of a knife. I felt a surge of guilt, followed by a wave of righteous anger. This was the consequence of her choices, no. Mine, she had wanted to handle it herself. Now she was. My only connection to the kids was through carefully orchestrated, secret channels. On their birthdays and at Christmas, I would send gifts to my mother's house, who would then pass them along. I included letters, telling them how much I loved them, how proud I was of them, and that I thought of them every single day. I didn't know if Lauren let them read the letters, but I had to try. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I was in the middle of a design proof, so I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. Hello. A hesitant voice on the other end spoke. Aunt Paige. My heart stopped. I would know that voice anywhere, even though it was deeper now on the edge of manhood. Rowan, I breathed, sinking into my chair. Yeah, it's me, he said. I could hear the smile in his voice, and tears immediately welled in my eyes. I got your number from Grandma. I hope that's okay. Of course it's okay, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Oh my God, Rowan, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you? You're so grown up. I'm 17 now, he said. I'm a senior. I'm applying to colleges. We spent the next 20 minutes catching up. He told me he was thinking of studying engineering, that Juliet was now 13 and obsessed with soccer, and that he remembered everything about our time together. The forts we built in the living room, the way I made his grilled cheese sandwiches, the silly songs I made up to help him with his multiplication tables. He told me he still had the Book of Constellations I gave him for his 10th birthday, the last gift I gave him in person. We miss you, he said quietly, and that simple phrase undid me. I miss you too, I sobbed, more than you'll ever know. We talked for almost an hour before he had to go. He promised to call again soon and to pass my number on to Juliet. That call was like a rainstorm after a decade of drought. Hearing his voice, knowing that he remembered me with love and not the bitterness his mother probably harbored, was a vindication I didn't know I so desperately needed. 2 weeks later, the other shoe dropped. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID read Lauren. My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the decline button. 8 years of silence. Why now? My curiosity, and perhaps a deep-seated need for closure, won out. I answered, my voice a flat, neutral hello. Paige, her voice was thin and frayed, stripped of its usual commanding tone. It was the voice of someone who had been worn down to a nub. Lauren, I replied, equally flat. There was a long pause, filled with the static of 8 years of unspoken resentment. I know it's been a while, she started, her words stumbling over each other. I'm sorry for everything. I shouldn't have said what I said. The apology was so weak, so late, that it barely registered. It was a flimsy bandage on a gaping wound. Why are you calling, Lauren? I asked, cutting straight to the point. She took a shaky breath. It's the kids. It's Rowan and Juliet. I'm in over my head, Paige. I don't know what to do. I stayed silent, letting her squirm. This was the call I had simultaneously dreaded and fantasized about for 8 years. Rowan is struggling, she confessed, her voice cracking. His grades are dropping, he's quiet all the time, he locks himself in his room. He's applying to colleges, and his guidance counselor says he's completely disengaged. And Juliet, she's just angry, all the time. At me, at Ian, at the world. She got suspended from school last week for fighting. Ian and I are working constantly, we're barely home, and when we are, it's just yelling. The whole house is a mess. The nannies don't help, they're just employees. They don't care. She finally broke down, the sound of her crying ragged and desperate. I've messed up, Paige. I really, really messed up. They needed you and I pushed you away because I was too proud and stupid. I know it's a lot to ask. I know I have no right. But I am begging you, can you please come back, just for a little while, to help me sort this out? They listened to you. Rowan's whole demeanor changed after he spoke to you last week. Please, Paige, I need your help. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of my computer filling the silence. I felt a cold, calm clarity settle over me. For years, I had imagined this moment. I had played out scenes in my head where I would scream, where I would list all my grievances, where I would make her feel an ounce of the pain I had felt. But hearing her broken voice on the other end of the line, I felt nothing but a hollow victory. She wasn't sorry for what she did to me. She was sorry for the consequences that were now affecting her. She hadn't called to heal our sisterhood. She had called because her perfect life was imploding and she needed her free, convenient solution back. She needed the unpaid nanny. I'll think about it, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. And then I hung up, leaving her sobbing on the other end of the line. The power dynamic had finally, irrevocably shifted, and I was going to use it. After that phone call, I didn't respond to Lauren's follow-up texts for 3 days. I needed time to process, to separate the genuine concern I felt for Rowan and Juliet from the toxic history with my sister. My first call was to Rowan. I needed the truth, not Lauren's panicked, self-serving version of it. We spoke that evening, and he was hesitant at first, clearly not wanting to betray his mother, but I gently prodded. Your mom called me, I said. She's worried about you and Juliet. I just want to understand what's really going on. Slowly, the story came tumbling out. It was worse than I thought. The perfect family Lauren and Ian had built was a house of cards, and it was collapsing in on itself. After I left, they had cycled through more than a dozen nannies and housekeepers. None of them had my personal investment, so they treated it like any other job. They did the bare minimum and left. The warmth and stability I had provided vanished overnight. Rowan explained that his parents' solution to everything was money. Bad grade? They hired an expensive tutor he didn't connect with. Acting out? They bought Juliet a new phone or a designer handbag. They threw money at the problems, but never their time or attention. Their lives were an endless series of board meetings, business trips, and client dinners. On the rare occasions they were home, they were exhausted and irritable, often bickering with each other over finances or work stress. It's like we live in a hotel, Aunt Paige, Rowan said, his voice quiet and heavy with a sadness that shouldn't belong to a 17-year-old. Mom and Dad are the managers, and Juliet and I are just long-term guests. They make sure we're fed and have clean clothes, but they don't actually know us. He told me about the big moments they'd missed. Ian had been on a business trip to Asia during Juliet's first-ever goal in a championship soccer game. Lauren had missed Rowan's lead role in the school play because of a last-minute merger negotiation. They sent flowers and apologetic texts, but it wasn't the same. The emotional neglect was profound. Juliet's anger, he explained, was a direct result of this. She felt invisible. Her lashing out at school was a desperate cry for attention that her parents were too busy to hear. She wasn't a bad kid, she was a lonely one. My heart ached for her. I remembered her as a sweet, bubbly 6-year-old. The thought of her being so lost and angry at 13 was devastating. But the most shocking revelation was about Lauren herself. Rowan told me, his voice dropping to a whisper, that he'd found his mom crying in her car in the garage a few weeks ago. He'd overheard her on the phone with a friend, admitting that she felt like a complete failure as a mother. She confessed that she had no idea how to connect with her own children. She had been so focused on providing them with everything she never had financially that she had failed to give them the one thing they actually needed: her. She told her friend that she remembered how easy it seemed for you, Rowan said, that the house was always calm and happy when you were here. I think she's finally realizing that she can't buy her way into being a good parent. That was the piece of the puzzle I had been missing. It wasn't just that Lauren was overwhelmed. She was facing a mirror and hated the reflection staring back at her. She saw me, the sister she had dismissed and exploited, as the benchmark for motherhood she could never reach. My selfish departure hadn't just inconvenienced her, it had exposed her deepest insecurities and failings as a parent. After my call with Rowan, I spoke to Juliet. It was harder to get her to open up. She was guarded, her responses short and laced with teenage sarcasm. But beneath the tough exterior, I could hear the voice of the little girl I used to tuck into bed. I didn't push. I just listened. I asked her about soccer, about her friends, about school. I let her talk about whatever she wanted, and slowly she began to thaw. She admitted that she missed me, that she hated the endless parade of nannies who treated her like a job requirement. "You were fun," she said, the admission sounding like it was physically painful for her to make. "You actually played with us." The lie of Lauren's perfect family wasn't just about appearances. It was a lie she had told herself. She believed that as long as she was a successful lawyer and provided a beautiful home, she was fulfilling her duties. She had outsourced the emotional labor of parenting to me for years, and when I left, she had no idea how to do it herself. The foundation of the family wasn't love and connectio. It was me. And when I was removed, the entire structure began to rot from the inside out. Armed with this knowledge, my path forward became clear. This wasn't about saving Lauren. It was about saving Rowan and Juliet from the collateral damage of their parents' ambition. And if, in the process, Lauren was forced to confront the wreckage she had caused, that would be her penance. I let another day pass, allowing her panic to fester. I wanted her to understand that I was not her emergency contact. I was not a button she could press to solve her problems. My help, if I chose to give it, would come at a price. Not a financial price, but something far more valuable. It would cost her her pride, her control, and the carefully constructed illusion of her life. When I finally called her back, my voice was calm and measured. "Lauren," I said, "I've spoken to the kids. I know what's been going on. If you want my help, we need to meet. In person. You're going to fly here to my city. We'll meet on my turf and I'm going to lay out my terms. And I promise you they are not negotiable." There was a moment of silence on her end, and I could almost hear the gears of her old, controlling self grinding against the desperation of her new reality. The old Lauren would have scoffed, demanded I come to her. But the woman on the phone was broken. "Okay, Paige," she whispered, "whatever you say." Lauren flew in 2 days later. I chose the meeting place deliberately, a neutral, slightly impersonal coffee shop near my apartment. I wanted to make it clear that this was not a cozy family reunion. This was a negotiation. I arrived 10 minutes early, chose a small table in the corner, and ordered a black coffee. I felt a sense of calm control I had never experienced in her presence before. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. The powerhouse corporate lawyer was gone. In her place was a tired, stressed woman who looked every one of her 40 years. Her expensive clothes seemed to hang off her, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She looked smaller, somehow, defeated. She spotted me and walked over, her movements uncertain. "Paige," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "thank you for meeting me." "Sit down, Lauren," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. I didn't stand to hug her. I didn't offer a smile. I maintained a professional distance. This was business. She sat, fumbling with her purse. A waitress came over, and Lauren ordered a chamomile tea, her hand trembling slightly as she pointed at the menu. Once the waitress left, an uncomfortable silence fell between us. She was waiting for me to speak, to offer some kind of olive branch. I offered none. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to be the one to break it. "I meant what I said on the phone," she began, her eyes pleading. "I am so sorry, for everything. Calling you selfish was the worst thing I've ever said to anyone, and it wasn't true. You were the most selfless person I knew, and I took advantage of you. I see that now." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Seeing it and fixing it are two very different things, Lauren. Your apology is 8 years too late. I'm not here to rehash the past. You called me because you need help with your children. I'm here to discuss the terms of that help. Her face fell slightly. She had clearly hoped for an emotional reconciliation. I wasn't ready to give her that. She had to earn it, and we were nowhere close. Okay, she said, nodding. Whatever you think is fair. I reached into my bag and pulled out a notebook and a pen. I had spent the last 2 days drafting this list. I placed it on the table between us. I'm not moving back in, I said, my voice firm and clear. Let's get that straight right now. My life is here. My career is here. I will not be your live-in solution ever again. What I am willing to do is help you create a new, sustainable system for your family. A system that involves you and Ian actually being parents. She flinched at the directness of my words, but nodded for me to continue. Demand number 1, I said, tapping the first point on my list. Back pay. For 6 years, I worked for you as a full-time caregiver, house manager, and personal assistant. I have calculated the average salary for such a position in your area, including overtime. I've adjusted for inflation. You owe me $360,000. Lauren's jaw dropped. Her eyes widened in shock. 300 and Paige, we can't just. You can and you will, I interrupted, my voice like ice. You are both partners at major firms. Do not tell me you can't afford it. This is not a request. It's a retroactive invoice for services rendered. It represents my lost income, my lack of savings, my non-existent retirement fund for the years I spent raising your kids. It's the price of my time, Lauren, time you took from me. It will be transferred to my account within 1 week, or this conversation is over. Yes. He stared at me, speechless. The lawyer in her was likely screaming about the lack of a formal contract, but the desperate mother knew she had no leverage. She slowly, reluctantly nodded. Demand number 2, a formal, written apology. Not just to me. You will write 1 letter to me, acknowledging in detail what you did. And you will write separate letters to Rowan and Juliet. In those letters, you will apologize for pushing me away, for lying to them about why I left, and for your emotional neglect of them. You will read these letters to them, with me and Ian present. Tears welled in her eyes. This was about pride, and I was demanding she swallow every last shred of it. Okay, she whispered. Demand number 3, mandatory family therapy. The 4 of you will begin weekly sessions with a qualified family therapist. I will choose the therapist. You will all attend every week without fail. No work emergencies, no business trips. This is non-negotiable. You're going to learn how to talk to each other and how to be a family. She nodded again, wiping a tear from her cheek. Demand number 4, a schedule overhaul. You and Ian will present me with a new weekly work schedule. It must demonstrate that one of you is physically present at home every morning before school and every evening for dinner, homework, and bedtime. No exceptions. This might mean one of you takes a step back at work. It might mean you make less money. I don't care. Your children are more important than your careers. You've proven you can't have both at your current pace, so you will choose your kids. This one hit her hard. It was a direct attack on the very foundation of her identity. But she knew it was true. Finally, demand number 5, I said, looking her directly in the eye. My role, if and only if you meet all of the above conditions, I will agree to help. I will fly in 1 weekend a month for the next 6 months. I will not be a nanny, I will be a consultant. I will help you and Ian implement new routines. I will mediate conversations. I will spend quality time with Rowan and Juliet to help them heal and reconnect. I will be their aunt again. But my role is temporary and advisory. The daily work, the emotional labor, that is now on you. You have to be the parents. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my demands settle in the air between us. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was trying to force her to build something real from the ashes of the fake life she had created. I was giving her a chance to fix her family, but on my terms. The price was her money, her pride, and her control, the 3 things she valued most. Lauren sat there for a long time, staring at the list as if it were a legal document sealing her fate. The tea she had ordered sat untouched, growing cold. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear for the first time in years. "Okay, Paige," she said, her voice hoarse. "Okay, we'll do it, all of it." A week later, a wire transfer for the full $360,000 appeared in my bank account. Seeing that number on the screen didn't bring me the wild joy I might have once imagined. Instead, it felt like a quiet, solemn closing of a painful chapter. It wasn't celebratory money, it was restitution. It was the tangible acknowledgement of a debt that had been owed for a decade. With the first condition met, I booked my flight. I arrived at their house, a place I hadn't set foot in for 8 years, on a Friday evening. Walking through the front door felt surreal. The house was still immaculate, still decorated with expensive, impersonal art, but the air was different. It was heavy with unspoken tension. Ian was there, standing awkwardly in the foyer next to Lauren. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, the stress of his job and his crumbling family etched onto his face. "Paige," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming. We appreciate it." I shook his hand briefly. "This isn't for you, Ian. It's for Rowan and Juliet." The kids came down the stairs then. Rowan gave me a tight, heartfelt hug, burying his face in my shoulder for a moment. It felt like no time had passed at all. Juliet was more hesitant. She stood back, arms crossed, her teenage armor fully in place. I didn't push. I just gave her a small, warm smile. "It's really good to see you, Juliet." A flicker of something, relief, maybe, crossed her face before she mumbled a "you too." The weekend was structured and intense. It was less of a family visit and more of a strategic intervention. I acted as a facilitator, guiding them through conversations they had avoided for years. On Saturday morning, we tackled the schedule. I sat with Lauren and Ian at their massive dining table, their work calendars spread out before them. The initial resistance was palpable. "I can't just clear my afternoons," Ian argued. "I have market closing reports. And I have client deposition." "That can't be moved," Lauren added. I just stared at them, my expression unwavering. "This was a condition of my being here. You will make a choice. The market will close without you. The depositions can be rescheduled. Your children, however, are not a line item you can postpone. Find a solution." The argument that followed between them was heated, revealing years of professional competition and blame shifting. But under my watchful eye, they were forced to confront the reality of their situation. By the end of the hour, they had a new schedule. Ian would work from home 3 days a week and handle the morning routine. Lauren would leave her office at 4:30 p.m. sharp every day to be home for dinner and the evening. It was a monumental shift, a complete restructuring of their lives. For the first time, their children's needs were being entered into their calendars as non-negotiable appointments. The main event, however, was scheduled for Sunday afternoon, the reading of the letters. We all gathered in the formal living room, a space so pristine it looked like it had never been used. I sat on one sofa with Rowan and Juliet. Lauren and Ian sat opposite us. Lauren held 3 envelopes in her trembling hands. This was the moment of truth, the public dismantling of her pride. She started with the letter to Rowan and Juliet. She took a deep, shaky breath and began to read. Her voice was thick with emotion, cracking as she forced the words out. "My dearest Rowan and Juliet," she began, "I am writing this to apologize, not just for one thing, but for many things. For a long time, I have failed you as a mother. I thought that providing a big house and all the things you wanted was enough, and I was wrong. I prioritized my work over you, and that is a mistake I will regret for the rest of my life." She looked up, making eye contact with each of them. "I owe you both an apology for why Aunt Paige left. I told you she left to follow her career, which was only part of the truth. The other part is that I drove her away. I took her for granted. I was not grateful for the love and care she gave you, and when she wanted to build a life of her own, I was cruel to her. I called her selfish when she was the least selfish person in our lives. I let my pride break our family apart, and you lost your aunt because of me. I am so sorry." Rowan was crying silently, tears streaming down his face. Juliet's tough exterior had completely crumbled. She was listening intently, her eyes wide and vulnerable. Lauren then turned to me, picking up the second letter. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "To Paige, There aren't enough words to say how sorry I am. You came to us when we needed you, and you gave us the best years of your life. You loved my children as your own, and you gave them the stability and warmth that I was too busy and too selfish to provide. You were the heart of this home, and I broke it. Calling you selfish was a reflection of my own guilt. I was jealous of your bond with the kids, and I was terrified that I could never measure up. Instead of learning from you, I pushed you out. I have lived with that shame for 8 years. I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. She finished reading and broke down completely, covering her face with her hands as deep, racking sobs shook her body. Ian put an arm around her, his own eyes filled with tears. The silence that followed was profound. It wasn't awkward or tense, but cleansing, like the quiet after a powerful storm. Juliet was the one who broke it. She got up from the sofa, walked across the room, and sat down next to her mom, tentatively putting an arm around her. "It's okay, Mom," she whispered. Rowan followed, kneeling in front of Lauren. "We love you, Mom. We missed you." It was the breakthrough. It was the moment the lies stopped and the healing began. I had forced this confrontation, orchestrated this painful moment of reckoning. But the result wasn't destruction. It was the first, tentative step toward building a real family. I had made my sister face her failures, not to punish her, but to free her children from the burden of them. As I sat there, watching them huddle together, a family truly seeing each other for the first time, I felt the last vestiges of my own anger finally begin to dissolve. The 6 months that followed were a series of carefully managed steps forward. I held up my end of the bargain, flying in 1 weekend a month. Each visit was different. The first couple of months were about implementation and accountability. I was a project manager for their family's reconstruction. I checked in on the new schedule. Lauren and Ian were sticking to it, though not without difficulty. Lauren admitted she felt like she was losing her edge at work, but then she'd recount a conversation she'd had with Juliet about a boy at school and realize she was gaining something far more valuable. Ian discovered he was actual. Lie good at making pancakes, and the morning routine, while chaotic, became a time of connection for him and the kids. The therapy sessions were tough. The therapist I chose was excellent, a no-nonsense woman who didn't let Lauren or Ian off the hook. They were forced to unpack their own baggage, their competitive dynamic, and the ways they had enabled each other's absence from their children's lives. Rowan and Juliet were given a safe space to express their anger and hurt. There were setbacks and arguments, but for the first time, they were communicating honestly. My role slowly shifted from that of a consultant to that of an aunt again. During my visits, we'd do normal family things. I went to Juliet's soccer games, cheering from the sidelines next to a beaming Lauren. I helped Rowan with his college application essays, listening as he talked excitedly about his future. We baked cookies, watched movies, and built a new kind of normal, 1 weekend at a time. The tension that had once filled the house was replaced by a tentative, fragile peace. My relationship with Lauren also began to thaw. The transaction of money and demands had cleared the air, creating a clean slate. We didn't fall back into our old patterns. A new dynamic emerged, one built on mutual respect. She started asking about my work, genuinely interested in my projects. She celebrated my successes. She saw me as Paige, her talented and independent sister, not just a convenient solution to her problems. The forgiveness she had asked for didn't come in a single moment, but gradually, over many small conversations and shared cups of coffee. The deep wound was still there, a scar I would always carry, but it no longer ached. On my final scheduled visit, 6 months after it all began, we were all sitting around the dinner table. It was a simple Tuesday night, but Lauren and Ian were both there, phones put away. Juliet was chattering about her soccer team, and Rowan was debating the pros and cons of 2 different universities he'd been accepted to. It was normal. It was the kind of peaceful family dinner I had always tried to create for them, but this time I was a guest, not the orchestrator. The parents were at the helm. Later that evening, after the kids had gone to their rooms, Lauren and I sat on the back porch. The air was cool and crisp. "You don't have to stop coming, you know," she said quietly. Just because the 6 months are up, you're always welcome here, as our sister, as their aunt. I know, I said, and I truly did. But I think my work here is done. You've got this, Lauren. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. Thank you, Paige, for everything. You didn't just save the kids, you saved me. I was drowning and I didn't even know it. She paused, then added, that money, I've been thinking, it's not enough. It doesn't cover the interest, the opportunity cost. I want to set up an investment account for you to help you start that design studio you always talked about. I was taken aback. This wasn't one of my demands. This was a genuine, heartfelt offer, a true act of restitution. It was a sign that she had truly changed. Thank you, Lauren, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I'd like that. I flew home the next day feeling lighter than I had in 20 years. My revenge, if you could call it that, was complete. But it hadn't been about watching my sister fail. It had been about forcing her to succeed in the only way that truly mattered. I had lost a decade of my life in her shadow, but in the end, I had reclaimed it on my own terms. I had my financial independence, a career I was proud of, and I had my family back. Not the broken, dysfunctional version from the past, but a new, honest, and healing one. My name is Paige, and I am a graphic designer. I am an aunt, I am a sister. But most importantly, I am the architect of my own life. I finally have my own studio in a bright corner of the city, funded by the past but built for the future. And as for my sister, she finally learned that being a mother isn't about what you can provide for your children, but how present you can be. It was a lesson that cost her a fortune, but it saved her family. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is not seeing someone fall, but forcing them to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet.